The base set meme deck is back, but this time it means business. Venusaur and Charizard together again, and an E-card. The interaction between the two is oddly reminiscent of that base set pairing. How exactly does this work? Let's start by looking at Expedition Venusaur. Harvest Bounty allows you to attach an extra energy per turn as long as it's to your active Pokemon, and as long as the first energy attached was also to your active Pokemon. Kind of the opposite energy effect as we saw with Bellossom in that Exeggutor deck. Bellossom attached an extra energy to a Pokemon on your bench. Harvest Bounty attaches an extra energy to your active Pokemon. And your active Pokemon is gonna be Charizard from Expedition. For this Charizard, the energy type doesn't even matter because Burning Energy is going to transform all basic energy on your side of the board into Fire Energy. And with the help of Venusaur, you're going to be able to power up a Scorching Whirlwind in 2 turns. That's enough to knock out any Pokemon you're going to run into in E-card, so you're pretty much guaranteed an OHKO. And while this is a similar attack to base set Charizard, the downside isn't as bad. Whenever you use Scorching Whirlwind, you flip 2 coins. If one is tails, you discard 2 energy. If both are tails, you discard all energy. Sometimes you get lucky and don't have to discard anything, but most of the time you're going to be discarding 2 energy off of Charizard. But thanks to Venusaur, you're powered back up next turn. You do have to invest a lot of cards into achieving this setup, but once you get it going, it's pretty hard to stop, and it is pretty overwhelming seeing 120 damage coming your way turn after turn. Using this deck, you also get to enjoy the absolute worst Charizard artwork in the card game. Aside from the major mechanics that we just talked about, this deck is pretty straightforward. So let's get into the deck list. There may be a little bit of controversy in this video because I use the opposite Bulbasaur and Charmander that is usually recommended for this deck. Most players like using that Sleep Seed Bulbasaur so that you can stall early game while you're getting all of your evolutions set up, but I like the 50 HP Bulbasaur that's just chilling. Plus, you're going to be evolving that Bulbasaur pretty quickly anyway, and the Ivysaur has Sleep Seed on it, so most games it's not even going to matter. We're going to be playing a 3-3-2 line of the Bulbasaur line. Like I said with Ivysaur, it's got Sleep Seed on there for 2 energy, dealing 20 damage with automatic sleep, which is still pretty good. Coming out on turn 2, evolving up and attacking while you're getting, your Charmander set up on the bench, you're getting all of your support Pokemon set up and finding those evolutions out of your deck. The deck does have Grass Energy in it so that you can attack with Bulbasaur and Ivysaur. You're almost never going to be attacking with Venusaur, but the option is still there. You may be wondering why run any Fire Energy at all if Charizard's Pokemon power can just transform it into fire anyway. Not if it's affected by a special condition, which a lot of the time it will be. Beedrill and Butterfree decks hate this Charizard, and so they're going to be coming for it hard, putting those special conditions on it as soon as it hits the field. As stated earlier, this Charmander is different than what most people run, but ultimately it's probably not going to matter. Charmander is usually going to be starting out on your bench anyway, but you do want to evolve it up into Charmeleon and get it into the active position as soon as you think you're going to have a Venusaur in play. That way, you can get the Ivysaur onto the bench off of 1 retreat cost rather than Venusaur's 2. Then evolve into Venusaur, moving up the Charmeleon or the Charmander, whatever you have in hand. The point is you want to go ahead and start attaching those double energy, and since it's only to your active, get the Charmeleon in the active position. If it's a Charizard, even better. Charizard is going to be your main attacker, and it's also going to be the main target of your opponent's KO, so it is important to have those Charizard handy, especially if you get at least one of them prized. That's a really bad position to be in, and so running a 4-3-3 line of Charizard. Your energy support's going to be coming from a 2-2 line of Clefable, which lets you make sure you have the basic energy in hand so that you can attach 2 of them every turn. You don't want to find yourself with a Venusaur on the bench, but you're not able to attach that second basic energy every turn because you don't have it in hand. Well, Clefable's going to put it in your hand. If you don't have a card in your hand to trade into your deck for that basic energy card, well, you have a 2-2 line of Porygon 2 that's going to have some draw support so that you can draw a hand, and if you don't have that basic energy in there, you can trade one of those cards for a basic energy using Clefable. Once again, I will say that this deck does take a lot of card investment to get its full setup going, but man, once it does get going, it is a purring engine of a deck. To help you get there, you're going to have some familiar supporter cards. You got your draw support in the form of 3 Professor Oak's Research, which is not only going to help you draw into what you need, it's really just going to load up your hand with any of those resources, because no matter what you draw, you're probably going to be playing it this turn or the next one. Just be sure you're not blasting through your deck too quickly or loading up your bench with, too many Pokemon that aren't really necessary. Like, you're probably not going to need an extra Bulbasaur on the bench unless there is a threat to your active Venusaur. You want to leave that bench space open for your Porygons and your Clefables. 3 copies of Underground Expedition as well, just for that little bit of extra draw support, and it also informs you as to what's on the bottom of your deck. Going to be running a full playset of Pokemon Fan Club. This deck is highly focused on just getting basic Pokemon onto the board as quickly as possible, and then searching out their evolutions and getting them onto the board as quickly as possible. So you're also going to see a full playset of Professor Elm's training method in here to grab whatever you're not naturally drawing off the top of your deck. Now, early game, you're looking to set up a lot of different Pokemon, and so you have a lot of different options for what you need to grab with your one supporter for the turn. So if you got a handful of evolutions, yeah, you're going to go for the Pokemon Fan Club. If you've already played a bunch of basic Pokemon and emptied your hand out, well, going for a Porygon 2 is a safe bet, because you're going to be needing that to replenish your hand over and over. Because any evolutions that you're drawing into are going to hit the field immediately. You want to have the energy in hand so that you can utilize Venusaur's power as well as Clefable's power. One of the hardest parts of playing this deck is deciding early game how you want to use your one supporter per turn to get as many resources as you possibly can to get this engine going. Switch is the only basic trainer in this deck. There's a couple copies in here just because Charizard and Venusaur both have kind of high retreat costs, especially Charizard. And sometimes your opponent's going to be able to put maybe 100 damage on that Charizard, not quite knock it out, and you're going to be able to deprive them of a prize just by getting that Charizard onto the bench and powering up another one in the active position. A couple copies of Town Volunteers as well, not only to get back those evolution cards after a Charizard is knocked out, but also to get back some of those basic energy that are being discarded by Charizard's attack. And then the deck is going to get topped off with 12 fire energy and 4 grass energy. The deck needs that many fire energy in it because you are going to be regularly discarding them, and you do need them in your hand so that you can attach them with Venusaur. So sometimes you have the opposite problem where your hand's just loaded down with only energy. The obvious external threats to this deck are water type decks, but even then I don't know that they are particularly threatening to Charizard, because it's going to be able to OHKO whatever is across the field. If not the one that's currently in your active position, then you're going to be able to get a revenge kill off of a Charmeleon or a Charizard on your bench. Kingdra isn't going to be a major threat just because its setup is just as slow as this deck's, and Rapids is not going to OHKO Charizard. It's not going to care about the discarded energy because of Venusaur. If anything, you're more concerned about Suicune just because it does have the chance to put you to sleep and potentially make you miss that OHKO on the next turn. Even Starmie, which is usually pretty threatening to any type of fire type deck, is only going to be able to hit Charizard for 100 damage off of a fully powered water gun. It just slightly misses that 60 damage sweet spot that is so important to the E-card format. What this deck really hates is special conditions, and that's another one of the reasons why there's 2 copies of Switch in there, so that you can get those Charizards out of some pretty precarious situations, especially against decks like Beedrill and Vileplume, that really mess around with the consistency of getting off those huge Scorching Whirlwind attacks turn after turn. Even something as simple as Poison. Not only is it going to shut off Charizard's power, which can be disruptive, usually it's not, but keeping that Charizard in the active position to continuously get off those Scorching Whirlwinds means that you're going to rack up poison damage, which does put Charizard in danger of an OHKO, when normally it wouldn't have to worry about those smaller damage attacks, the ones that are 50 and below. While Venusaur Charizard is a fun deck to run, like I said, getting that engine going and then just enjoying the amount of damage you're tossing out turn after turn is fun. I don't really like using this as a fire type deck just because there's a lot of competition in E-Card, especially coming from stage 1 Pokemon that kind of do what Charizard does but better. Basically what it comes down to is that 120 is an excessive amount of damage to be doing, especially when it's taking 4 energy, and yes, that is being accelerated by Venusaur, but you're spending an extra turn by evolving up into a stage 2 when really all you need to deal is about 60 damage, and you're able to do that a turn earlier and more consistently with less setup with 2 different Rapidash, 2 different Ninetales, 2 different Houndooms, and hell, I'm going to go ahead and say it, this Charizard isn't even the best one in E-Card. Within the E-Card format, I would definitely rather do 60 damage for 3 energy with minimal setup than to try for 120 damage on turn 3 with lots and lots of setup. But maybe that's just me. Flamethrower is going to OHKO a Scizor just as easily as a Scorching Whirlwind, but one takes way less work. And in case you're wondering, this is what the alternate Bulbasaur and Charmander look like. Again, it's completely up to you. I always prefer to go for higher HP or just whatever low-cost colorless attack fits my playstyle more. And in this case, I just preferred the other Bulbasaur and Charmander. As always, let me know your thoughts, opinions, and preferences down in the comments, as well as any request decks you have, or if there's just some E-Card cards that you want to see in play. I can maybe cook something up. Social media links are down in the description, and I'll see you next video.